I've recently discovered these things called video games, and so I made one in 72 hours. My roguelike has a bunch of different enemies, a weirdly motivational wizard, cool dungeon generation, and more mushrooms than a hoarding mycologist. In this game you play as Bowbert, a bow-wielding gooblet with a horrific past. He wasn't subscribed to my YouTube channel. The first thing I worked on was the bow mechanics, because I really wanted it to feel squishy and satisfying when pulling back your arrows. It works kind of like Minecraft. I drew a few bow pulling sprites, and then the game swaps between them as you hold the mouse down. You let go and the arrow fires, nice and shrimple. It's actually quite fun to use by itself, but to punch up the movement I also added a quick dodge roll mechanic when pressing the spacebar, so Bowbert can just get zooming around. The visual effects for this weren't too difficult, I just spawned ghost versions of Bowbert behind him when rolling, and this turned out sick as all flip. So now we can dodge and shoot arrows all over the place, and when the arrow flies through the room it has this invisible circle at the tip of it, and this is used to check whether the arrow is hitting a wall and stops it from moving. But the circle can also be used to detect when it hits a monster. Oh wow, what a smooth transition to making the enemies. First up, Dark Goober. Totally not based off the Clash Royale Dark Goblin, and I'm really happy with how he turned out. Dropping him in the game, he does absolutely nothing. He just stands there, full of bridled rage. So let's fix that by giving him some simple AI. Dark Goober finds the player's position and walks towards it, with some randomization added to this angle. Otherwise, these monstrously monstrous monsters would all go directly towards the player, and it would feel a bit robotic, so by randomizing this direction, it's a bit of a cheaty way to make them feel like they're more complex than they actually are. So the enemy walks some distance and launches a dart towards Bowbert. Then the cycle continues. You choose a direction, walk towards it, fire a dart, and repeat. Now because triangles are just less edgy squares, I made a triangle variant of the Dark Goober as well. Naturally his name is Dart and Goober. Yep, it behaves exactly like the square version, but it has slightly less HP and increased walking speed, so it feels a little bit different to play against, but I didn't have to code up a whole new AI. They still shoot darts towards the player and do the same amount of damage. Alright, now it's time to get fungy because we're making the mushroom monsters. Step 1, draw them. Do they look like mushrooms? Epic. Step 2, everything else. Firstly, the shroomlet will walk towards the player and shoot just like before, but instead it spreads out 4 mushroom spores in a diamond shape around it. These spores hang around for a couple seconds before disappearing, and even when they're not moving you can still get hurt if you walk into them. But you can avoid these spores by dodge rolling through them, which I think makes this new attack style pretty fun to play against. And we have the same thing with our purple guy, the spiky bullet, except it only shoots 3 spores, but they will do a full heart of damage, so dodging these ones becomes way more important. Now we do have more enemies coming up soon. Slimy, grimy, tiny, spiny, piney, explodey little goobers. But before that, I want to show you something important. This is what the game looks like without player animations. As someone with totally legitimate medical expertise, I can confidently diagnose Bowbert with a severe case of non-squishyitis. The lack of motion here makes the gameplay feel stiff and like he's just gliding around, and it feels so much more correct with these animations. So let's talk about sine waves, state machines, and the slight error in my programming that led to this. Right now, Bowbert's Y scale is 1. If we bring that number down, he becomes squish. If we flip between those two values, we get motion, something close to what we want, but it looks kinda choppy and weird, which is also what I was told when I recently entered a modeling competition. We could use a triangle wave for this, but it still feels kind of unnatural. So instead, I used the humble sine wave. You know sine waves? They're like triangles or something? I don't know. Using the sine wave we get a smooth function that squishes up and down for an easy idle animation. And because tilting is a natural part of gaming, I added another sine wave for rotation, wobbling Bowbert back and forth by a few degrees. Then, based on whatever Bowbert is actually doing in the game, we can simply switch between those animation profiles for some nice looking silly movement. The only difference with this walking set of animations is that the frequency is turned up so the animations run quicker, and the effects of those animations are stronger, making the squish and rotation more noticeable. This is pretty cool because we can use this same squishy system on our outrageously ostentatious, oddly over-oscillating ops. This way, all the creatures in our world feel connected. We don't have some enemies with a completely different visual style from one another. So these funny, albeit simple animations gives the game some personality, which is always nice. And fun fact that I'm totally not just remembering now, Bowbert's eyes also track your mouse cursor. It gets the vector from the center of the player towards where the mouse is, and then his eyes will move so very slightly in that direction. Obviously not too far that the pupils just leave his body entirely, but it's a nice detail nonetheless. And because this entire animation system is super customizable, I can put whatever numbers I want. Maximum squish value of 1? More like maximum squish value of 12. Got him. Okay, I apologise for yapping about maths for too long. That was quite the tangent. No game is complete without slimes that when you kill them, they split into smaller versions of themselves. So I drew up the Slimelet, who looks very edible, and made him periodically hop towards the player. They're not very precise, so they don't usually jump towards bowbert's exact position, and they also have a chance to hop backwards away from the player, which was to make their movements less predictable. When the Slimelets are spitefully slain, 3 smaller versions pop out. These are small Slimelets, so I will call them Slimelets. Wow, such linguicism. Slimelets only have 1 HP, so they're super easy to kill. In fact, you can just dash right through them, which is a fun little bonus for these fun little guys. But they move very quickly and very randomly, so they can still be dangerous and get in the way. Their sprite is very cute though. They weirdly resemble the most powerful goober in the entire gooberverse. His name is Gub, but these Slimelets don't have soul-destroying malice behind their eyes, so I think we're safe. At least for now. Alright, so these slimes are cute creatures combusting into even cuter creatures. Let's talk about something that explodes in a much more destructive way, because next up we have the kaboomblet. All they really do is chase down the player, and when they get close enough they transform into their bomb state, which flashes faster and faster until it explodes. I had tons of fun making these over-the-top, intense explosion particles, and overall I think it looks pretty nice. You can also trigger the explosion by hitting them with arrows, which can be a good strategy if you want to bloodthirstily blow up a bunch of these beasts. The way this works is that when the kaboomblet explodes, it'll check for any enemies within a circle, and for those that are inside it, the health of those enemies will instantly go to 0 and they'll die. Boom, easy as that, and it makes for some super satisfying gameplay when you can get all of these enemies together to blow them all up. But of course you don't want to get too close to the explosion yourself. I wanted this to be dynamic, so I simply have 4 differently sized rings, and when the bomb explodes, it'll check for which circle bowbert is currently standing in, causing more damage closer to the center. The final enemy is probably the most difficult one. It's the ghostly, ghastly, scary, spooky spooper goober. He appears near the middle of the room and will shoot 3 projectiles at a time towards you. I call these projectiles spoop goop because of course I did, and then he will very quickly disappear again. So there's only a very short time frame in which you can actually aim and hit this guy, because when he's invisible, obviously your arrows can't land on him. I like that when he is visible though, he doesn't move, so it makes for a bit of a different strategy against this guy. The spoop goop also does a full heart of damage, making him extra scary, and especially when he's in a room with a bunch of other mobs, cause he can just kind of jump scare you and force you to dodge roll out of the way. Overall, pretty good stuff, and he is kind of a cutie, you gotta give it to him. Okay, I feel like I'm flying through all these game mechanics, and I don't care, so let's keep going and talk about dungeon generation. And the only world that I want to generate is one where I can plan my projects efficiently and get the work done. So let me introduce you to Odoo. Managing a project can feel exactly like a roguelike game, with random encounters and endless enemies. It can be difficult to win, unless you've got a good system, just like Odoo. It's an all-in-one business management platform that helps keep your projects organized. Odoo's project app is especially powerful. You can spin up new projects instantly, lay out timelines, and keep track of every questline you've got going, all from one clean dashboard. Inside each project, you can create tasks and subtasks to schedule activities like focus sessions, calls, meetings, or reminders. It's flexible, intuitive, and doesn't require you to keep dodge rolling away from the difficult assignments. And Odoo gives you multiple ways to visualize your progress, which is especially helpful when working with so many people. You can use Kanban view to drag tasks around, Gantt view to see how your timelines and dependencies line up, or list view if you want clean organization and batch edits. And if you're working with an adventuring party, a team, you can invite them straight in. Collaboration is seamless. Tag team members, attach files, leave notes, and even send emails directly from a task. And the best part is that your first app is free for life, with unlimited hosting and support. So whether you're a solo dev like me crawling through your own creative dungeon or coordinating a full production with other party members, Odoo has your back. Check out the link below to give it a try, and huge thanks to Odoo for supporting today's silly video. There are tons of fancy algorithms that I could use for procedural generation, and they're all valid and very interesting, but because I gave myself a time limit, I went down a simpler route, so here's how it works. With the simple pixel map I made, the yellow square in the center is the starting room. No enemies, just a calm little space to begin your jaunty quest. The white squares branching off are regular rooms. You walk in, the doors close, enemies spawn, and the doors reopen once everyone's dead. Well, not everyone except Bowbert. Bowbert is too cool today. These red pixels mark potential boss rooms, and the purple ones are potential wizard rooms. We'll get to those later. Then I can just swap in room templates for the pixels, and just like that we have a whole connected world. I drew a bunch of different formations of these pixel blueprints for variety, and before generating the rooms we can flip and rotate them for even more variety. It's simple, it's static, but honestly, it works surprisingly well. And if I ever make future videos on this game, I can easily add in new types of rooms for things like puzzles, lore, NPCs, cats, whatever, simply by assigning a new color to this pixel map. But with this system, every room did feel very samey, because there were just so many normal rooms which had this generic foresty vibe. So instead of spawning this exact room every time, I made multiple templates that get randomly chosen. There's a woody room with twigs and stumps where only the dark goobers spawn, there's a stony room with a bunch of rocks, and finally a mushroom room full of tiny mushrooms and exclusively spawning the shroomy enemies. And even within those subtypes, the individual floor decorations are also randomized, so every version feels at least a little bit different. To do this, I drew a bunch of grass, stones, rocks, twigs, stumps, and shrooms. Each decoration spot shuffles its position slightly, so nothing sits directly on a grid. And each decoration has a 50% chance to flip horizontally, to break up any repetition. And I don't like repeating jokes I made from the last Goober simulation video, which the way I handled the decorations there was actually pretty similar. These are just easy tricks to make environments feel fresh without drawing dozens and dozens of decorations. And that brings me to yap about the rooms themselves. Each room can have up to 4 openings depending on whether there's a neighbouring room in that direction, so I needed a system that could handle every combination. I started by blocking out these rooms in a bare bones way, where each wall can swap in a different sprite depending on whether it should be open or closed. This might seem pretty simple, and that's because it is. There are so many other games whose map generation is way more impressive and algorithmic and mathematically majestic. But with the time limit I gave myself, would it really be worth it to make something like this? Probably not. When all the enemies are defeated, the doors open to the next rooms, so it's doing exactly what I need to for the game. Why would I ever overcomplicate things? Though this was still a bit of a programming challenge to put together, which is why I have these test versions to help me find bugs in the code. And honestly, it's just a cool way to track my progress. Internally in the code, I labeled these rooms as having north, south, east, and west directions to help orient myself. But the thing is, I truly can never remember which direction is east or west. I always have to say in my head, never eat soggy Weet-Bix. Every single time, and I feel like a dumb donkey cause of it. Maybe there are some other ways to remember these names, I don't know, but this is a deep-rooted insecurity of mine, and a personal characteristic that I'm not particularly proud of. But I'm coming clean in this video, I'm opening up about my deepest shame, and sharing my truth, which is that I do not know my map words very well. I'm gonna title this video 20-year-old Australian rants about cardinal directions for way too long. Each room has a set of spawn points where enemies can appear. This triggers when bowbert walks through this star-shaped invisible trigger zone in the center of the room, and then the monsters start popping in one by one with these cool color-coded particle effects. And to control the number and types of enemies that would spawn, I made a very simple difficulty system. Each level of difficulty has their own pool of enemies and their chances of being picked. The higher difficulties lean more towards spiky blitz, kaboom blitz, and spooper goopers, since they're the tougher ones to fight against. Each level of difficulty also increases the total number of enemies in a room, with a little ±1 randomness to keep things fresh. Although the difficulty doesn't change the actual attributes of the enemies themselves, at least not yet. I feel like just giving the enemies more health and damage would be a bit of a cop-out, but maybe there is a clever way to achieve this, I don't know. I'll label this as a future me problem. Now before we get into the NPCs and power-ups, I want to talk about game juice. That's why they call me the Juice Man. When developing a game, it's really important to include details to let the player know that their actions have had an impact, and by doing this, we make these actions feel fun and satisfying. And that's why for most things that bowbert does, the camera shakes a tiny bit. It makes you feel like you're actively in and affecting the world. The screen shakes more with bigger actions like a kaboomlet exploding. I could turn this way up to induce headaches and various other cognitive ailments if I really wanted to, but even a small amount of camera shake goes a long way in juicifying your game. Also, when you draw back your bow, the camera zooms into bowbert slightly and darkens the edges of the screen to build anticipation before you fire. And again, this makes the action feel more impactful. And of course, particles. Game dev is 50% particle making, 50% not knowing what you're doing, and 10% mathematical errors. Most of the actions in this game are paired with a particle system, so that's an arrow hitting a wall, enemies shooting at you, the trails behind the spoop goop, and of course, monsters spawning and dying. Then finally, the hearts have a passive bobbing animation, and when bowbert gets hit, they flash white and aggressively wiggle and jiggle around. Without this juice, the game feels very soulless. Of course, it still functionally plays the same, but it's just so dry and stale, much like the attempts of meta humor and breaking the fourth wall in this video. NPC time. If you've seen my YouTube shorts, which I also shamelessly post to Instagram and TikTok, you've probably met the wise wizard goob. He's been giving motivational quotes to troubled gooblets, guiding them along their cosmic journeys with his inspiration. So I thought it'd be fun to design a special wizard room that can spawn anywhere in the map. I added mushrooms and stumps for the magical and mystical vibe, and of course the centerpiece is the cauldron, with these colourful particles flying into the air. When you enter the room, Wise Wizard Goob thinks of a random phrase to tell you. Some of these are existential and inspirational, others are silly and just take the edge off your hardcore gaming session. I only wrote 12 of these so far, but I can easily just add in new ones when I get a new idea. Or when you get a new idea, if you want to comment things for Wise Wizard Goob to say. And as you probably remember, because you're so smart and brilliant and neuron having, these wizard rooms spawn on the purple pixels in the pixel map. I place them at the ends of corridors, so they feel like a little tucked away secret for you to stumble upon. Although the red squares here were meant to be boss fights, but I quickly realized that I did not have the time to make something that intense and complicated. Still, designing a big boss would be super fun for this game, and maybe for a dedicated video, so if you have any ideas, let me know. But yeah, because my recent projects have been bigger in scope, I wanted to create this game in a super short time frame, just to make something and share a fun video about it. So that's why I only gave myself 72 total hours to develop the game, and while this strict timeline limited what I was able to achieve, it also prevented me from adding too much and getting overwhelmed with new ideas, and overworking myself to the point where whatever I created would actually turn out worse. Realistically, I didn't do all of this in a 3-day sprint. I spent about 8 hours a day across 8 days making stuff, with another 2 cubed hours set aside for planning and bug fixing. But it was still a great little project to keep me busy over my summer break. The final game mechanic is the power-up system. This is a pretty common thing to find in roguelikes. They are abilities that can strengthen you throughout your run and might change how you play. Naturally, my brain went to calling these power-ups sigils because they're like little magical etchings, but then I thought, gooblets are inherently silly. Silly sigils? Silligils? What the heck, yeah. The first silligil I made was triple shot. You fire 3 arrows at once, which is great for hitting more enemies or landing all 3 of these on the same target for triple damage. But to balance it, it increases your firing cooldown, so you have to wait longer between shots. And that led me to a simple design philosophy. Silligils should always help the player, but most of them should have a bit of a drawback. Nothing to really stop your gameplay from being good, but just to add some depth to it. For the other silligils, we have zoomsters, giving you more speed but less hearts, the piercer, which makes your arrows fly through enemies but you can barely move when you're charging your bow, the arrow friend, which just fires an arrow in a random direction every time you shoot, useless, which does nothing, peaceful, which increases the chance that any room you walk into will just not spawn any monsters, and silly hatter, which gives bowbert a new random hat. You can find 3 random silligils in the wizard's room, and right now you can combine them to create kind of like different builds. I think an expanded version of this system could get really interesting, like different character classes with unique playstyles. It reminds me of the Hollow Knight charm system, so maybe you would only be able to equip a few silligils at once. Not really sure, I guess I'll have to think about this a bit more. So how can you play the game for yourself? Well, like I said, I'd love to add boss fights, new enemies, more silligils, new room templates, just more world building and polish before actually uploading the game. This means that you and your comments can help shape the way the project grows, and I guess if you want to talk about it in more detail, feel free to discuss it in the Discord server. I might release the game after one more video, or maybe I'll make a couple more devlogs before letting it loose into the wild. Honestly, this whole project was just meant to be a small fun thing to work on for a bit. I really enjoyed it, and I also hope that you enjoyed the silliness along the way. Wait, I didn't do any quick side tangents.